Hello and welcome to Writing America, Pages and People. If you're here to learn about an American author and some of their works, then you're in the right place. My name is Rachel Rigolino and I'm an instructor in the English department at the State University of New York at New Paltz. So come on, we'll watch this video and leave some comments below.
When you picture the roaring 20s, the hot jazz, the cold gin, the feathered flappers dancing the Charleston, you're stepping into a world defined and even named by F. Scott Fitzgerald. He was the premier chronicler of what he dubbed the Jazz Age, an era of prosperity and excess between World War I and the Great Depression. But Fitzgerald was much more than just a party host. He was one of the most influential American writers of the 20th century, exploring the bright promises and the dark corruptions of the American dream. In 2025, his masterpiece, The Great Gatsby, reached a milestone. It's 100 years since its publication. Now, it's a novel that's so embedded in our culture that, as critic Michael LaPointe notes, even if you haven't read it, you already know it. It's been adapted into 4 movies, stage plays, an opera, and even an episode of The Simpsons. But who was the man behind the myth? And as we hit the 100th anniversary of The Great Gatsby, how do we look past the cliches of the Jazz Age to understand Fitzgerald's life and his enduring gift for hope, as he put it? Francis Scott Key Fitzgerald, he was named after the author of the Star-Spangled Banner, was born in St. Paul, Minnesota in 1896, and from an early age he was driven by a desire to write, but he also had a fascination with wealth and status. He attended Princeton University starting in 1913, but academics really weren't his focus. Instead, he poured his energy into writing short stories, reviews, and lyrics for the prestigious Triangle Club theater troupe. He withdrew, though, eventually due to poor grades, and in 1917 he enlisted in the U.S. Army. He never saw combat, which disappointed him, but while stationed near Montgomery, Alabama, he met the vibrant, privileged Zelda Zare. They fell in love, but their relationship hit an early obstacle familiar in Fitzgerald's later fiction. He wasn't rich enough, and Zelda initially broke off their engagement, believing he couldn't support her on an author's meager earnings. But Fitzgerald was determined. He revised the novel he'd been working on and submitted it to Scribner's. And in 1920, This Side of Paradise was published. It was an immediate, stunning success. The novel captured the voice of the post-war generation, exploring college life and class issues with startling authenticity. Suddenly, Fitzgerald was famous. Scribner sold 50,000 copies, and Zelda married him a week after publication. Scott and Zelda then went on to become the golden couple of a Gilded Age. The Fitzgeralds lived large, often beyond their means, and to fund their lifestyle, Scott churned out short stories for top magazines like the Saturday Evening Post. Now, while he sometimes dismissed these as commercial fiction written for quick cash, many are essential to understanding his evolving themes. Many critics have pointed out that The Great Gatsby, published in 1925, was a leap forward in his craft. True, it is a tightly structured narrative, told through the eyes of Nick Carraway, tracing Jay Gatsby's obsessive, criminally funded quest to win back Daisy Buchanan. We often read it either as rosy-eyed nostalgia for the 1920s or as a simple cautionary tale about the emptiness of the American dream. But the new centennial editions of Gatsby are challenging some of these interpretations. Fitzgerald wasn't just writing a social critique of the jazz age, he was writing a romance, some people argue. Gatsby's acquisition of wealth isn't the goal. It's a mean to achieve an idealized past with Daisy. The core of J. Gatsby and the novel's enduring power lies in what Nick Carraway calls Gatsby's, quote, extraordinary gift for hope, a romantic readiness. Perhaps, as some critics have said, Gatsby is a type of mystic in search of what he loves the most, his own holy grail. Ironically, Gatsby was not the immediate blockbuster Fitzgerald was hoping for. In fact, reviews were mixed, with his editor telegraphing to him, quote, sales situation doubtful. It would not be until World War II, when 150,000 copies were distributed to American troops, that the novel began its journey into our literary canon. The years following Gatsby were marked by slow, painful decline, and it took Fitzgerald 9 years to complete his next novel, Tender is the Night, which was published in 1934. By the mid-1930s, Fitzgerald felt washed up as a writer, and in a series of brutally honest essays for Esquire, which were later collected as The Crack-Up, he compared himself to a broken plate. In 1937, desperate to pay his debts and cover Zelda's medical expenses, he moved to Hollywood to work as a screenwriter for studios like MGM. He did contribute to some well-known films, but he found the work difficult, and he received few credits. His own life began to mirror his bleakest fiction in many ways, and his short story An Alcoholic Case provides a glimpse into this period. The story details a nurse struggling to care for an alcoholic cartoonist. It opens with a physical struggle between the cartoonist and the nurse over a bottle of gin she's trying to keep away from him. The nurse tries to manage the patient, but he's both manipulative and self-destructive. She finds her patient difficult, and the story is stark. It's a brutal self-assessment from an author who knows that he's losing his own battle with alcoholism. By 1940, Fitzgerald felt he was a, quote, forgotten man. In fact, his final royalty statement from his publisher was only $13. He was diligently working on a new novel about life in Hollywood called The Last Tycoon, but he wouldn't live to finish it. And in December of 1940, F. Scott Fitzgerald died of heart attack. He was only 44 years old. In some sense, Fitzgerald died believing he was a failure, but the publication of The Last Tycoon after his death prompted critics to reassess his legacy. And by the 1950s, a Fitzgerald revival was in full swing, and The Great Gatsby was recognized as a masterpiece. Today, a century after Gatsby, we are still grappling with the themes Fitzgerald laid bare: the tension between idealism and materialism, the longing for lost greatness, and nostalgia and despair. F. Scott Fitzgerald lived hard and crashed hard in some sense, and we can say maybe he embodied the excesses and the anxieties of his era, but he never stopped analyzing the human heart and the American experience. He captured, perhaps better than anyone, the beauty and the tragedy of striving both for love and the American dream.